Today's video is an extension of this month's newsletter. So this month in the newsletter, I wrote all about Arabesque in ways that we don't always think about it. But I didn't list out a ton of conditioning exercises, so this video is to go along with that. If you did not get the newsletter because you haven't signed up for it, you can do that on my website, geekyballerina.com. First off, we have the transverse abdominis. It's one of your ab muscles, obviously. Transverse, it goes sideways. Your transverse abdominis is deeper than your rectus abdominis, which means it's much harder to poke. You don't really see it. It's really tricky for some people to be able to sense when it is contracting and when it is not. We need a really great, very strong transverse abdominis in Arabesque because it helps to stabilize the spine. The transverse abdominis is going to stabilize at the bottom of the spine, which then allows the top the freedom that it needs. If we don't have that support, it's almost like planting a flower. You want to put it in a pot. I really think the key to helping people engage and strengthen their transverse abdominis is helping them find it. Once you've found it, it's a lot easier to notice the other exercises that you know and that you do that engage it. And it's also easier to intentionally engage it while you're dancing. So when I help kids find it, we start laying on our back. Put your hands on your hip bones and then go about an inch in. If you don't know how far an inch is, by the way, if you have almost grown-up size hands, and I only have almost grown-up size hands, if you put your fingers on your hip bone and you walk forward like a little man walking, it's just one step, is about an inch. So you have your hands on your hips, take one step in towards your midline, turn your guy towards your feet, take one step closer to your feet. That's where we want to have the hands because this is a really low abdominal muscle. And then you want to think about, I often tell kids it's like a cummerbund, right? And then it weaves more closely together. This is part of why it's hard to feel. We don't want to suck in because we can't breathe, and that's a problem. We're not going to actively pull the hip bones closer together. It's a very subtle movement. So the image of a cummerbund weaving together has been really helpful. Or if you imagine like elephant ears, obviously they're bigger than my hands, but you have like elephant ears that hug together, like you're getting an elephant ear hug. Those both can help students activate that muscle. And by the way, be sure to tell them if they don't figure out how to activate it on the first try or the first day, that is normal. We just keep trying till we get it. Yeah, so here we are. Step in, step down. And then as you exhale, imagine that cummerbund weaving closer together, or imagine those elephant ear hugs. We're not changing the tilt of the pelvis. We're just imagining. The next muscle group are the obliques, the internal and external obliques. They are on the side of our bodies. They help us with rotation, but they also help us not rotate. So if you have a student who's flying open in that arabesque, oblique work is going to help to counterbalance that. For your obliques, I'm a big fan of side planks. If you haven't worked on obliques with your students, I would start with just a regular side plank. But when you're ready to go to a new level, on your elbow, side plank, here we are. You're gonna dip down but not touch the floor with your hip. Roll in the hips towards the floor. Roll the hips back to the side and press back up. So we don't wanna do just the shoulders. We wanna roll in the hips. My top foot, when I'm fully side, is stacked on my bottom foot. As I roll, I start to bring that big toe onto the ground because that's most comfortable for me. Have fun with that. The next thing we're going to talk about is the pelvic floor. Especially with young kids, I don't yet know a great way to talk about the pelvic floor, my friend Heather Frixell has a great description that I do borrow all the time. She calls them the road trip muscles. Like you're on a road trip and you're stuck on the freeway, you really need to use the bathroom, but it's not an option right now. That's the best approach that I have found so far. Fortunately, the exercise that helps with the pelvic floor also helps with the glutes. So if you, like me, want to help condition and strengthen this muscle group without having to find a way to talk about it, we can work the pelvic floor and the glutes at the same time. Why do we need strong glutes for an arabesque? Your glute muscles are hip extensors. So arabesque is like a hyperextension in the hip coupled with some hyperextension in the back as well. You can't have an arabesque only focusing on one part of the body. We have to work in a team here. For the pelvic floor and the glutes, a very simple bridge is all we need. Here we are. You could add in an extra moment of awareness of the transverse abdominis. Think, contract the transverse abdominis. And then we bring the hip bones up and back down. So when I originally learned this, way back in the day, we started with a tuck in the pelvis and a roll up the spine, and a roll down the spine and untuck. I don't choose to do it that way because I find that it disconnects the bottom of the ribs to the hip bones, and this posture right here, when we stand up, is gonna end up looking like this. And this is not helpful. So I'm sure there are reasons to do it that way. But since I don't really want people to sway back in my class, I try to take the whole waist area up as one piece with my hips and my ribs connected by imaginary suspenders and down as one piece. The next muscle group that we don't always think of is the hamstrings. The hamstrings are a group of 4 muscles on the back of the thigh. So what do? The hamstrings help with hip extension. They help the glutes with hip extension. This is why when you go hiking downhill, your hamstrings are sore. They help with hip rotation. I really like this exercise because it is a harder version of something that I was making kids do as part of point conditioning anyway. We're gonna be more ready for point and have better arabesques. Yes. If you Google exercises for the hamstrings, the first thing that comes up is a deadlift. Here's the deal. I am not ever gonna use a barbell. And I don't think that dance studios should have barbells in them, because can you imagine what would happen in the unsupervised time? Yeah, so here's an alternative. Parallel. And then as you hinge at the waist, well, you're not hinging at the waist, you're hinging on top of your hip bones. But as you're doing that, you're gonna bring your arms up and you're gonna let your leg come with you. So you're here, 1. This leg does not turn out. And then you stand, you drive that lifted big toe to the other one to stand up 2. You'll feel the hamstrings more as you stand up. So, let's see if I can do the other side. So, forward 1. This is very similar to the airplane test that we do in the point evaluation. And recover 2. And the last muscle group that I mentioned in the newsletter was the adductor magnus. The adductor muscles are the inner thighs. They're your groin. They help with hip stability, hip mobility. We don't think about them a ton in ballet because they're not outward rotators. They're not hip flexors. They're not really hip extensors. They do a lot of stabilizing, but this is why they're great for the arabesque, because a strong set of adductor muscles, in particular the magnus, is gonna help you center your weight over your supporting foot and keep it there. The tendency sometimes is to fly open and off that leg in an arabesque, and the adductors are gonna help bring you back over that center line. Adductors. It does not matter how many years I've been doing this for. Every time I'm like, Oh, I hope I can do this. So you're gonna have a much easier time. But you start lying on your side, right? You can be down on your shoulder or you can be up on your hand. Whoa! Hi, see? I'm already struggling. So anyway, here you are. You're on your side. Hips are stacked. We're not rolling. We're not relaxing. We're here. You take your top leg, plant it on the ground. I like to hold it. I don't know why. I just do. Flex your bottom foot. Up and down. Parallel. If you turn it out, you work the muscle in a different way. You are also welcome to do little pulses at the top. I had a teacher who would make us do circles forward and circles backward. That class was killer. And it was every Tuesday, but man, it was beneficial. So there you have it. Those are some exercises to complement the information from this month's newsletter. Again, if you did not get the newsletter, but you'd like to, you can sign up for that on my website, geekyballerina.com. I've got all kinds of teaching resources there. I'm always working on adding new things. I hope you have a really great class and you are really proud of your Arabesque.